Hi, it's Michael and Anthony here presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for the current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, with Anthony Turner from the Small Business Mentoring Service, we'll interview a different small business expert or a fellow business owner and get them to share their best tips and insights for you, the listeners. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. Thanks also to our supporters, Kerr Capital and the Small Business Mentoring Service. Okay, today on Small Business Banter, I'm really pleased to welcome in Dave Strutton. Dave is an ex-almond farmer in South Australia, but turned franchisee for a very successful national franchise organisation. He's going to tell us all about it. Great to be in the studio with Anthony Turner from the Small Business Mentoring Service. Good morning, Anthony.
Good morning, Mike, and to Dave as well. It's really nice to be here and sitting in the chair.
So it is indeed. Dave, do you want to give those listening in just a little bit of a background about your personal and business experience, and then we'll hit you with some questions?
Oh, certainly. So thank you for having me. So look, as you mentioned, I was originally an almond grower, grew up in Adelaide, and so that was sort of through the 70s and the 80s. And my father, who was working in an office type position, decided that he'd had enough of that and wanted to work outdoors. So started looking around for a little hobby farm, and then that turned into something a little bit more serious and decided almonds were the way to go. So started looking more seriously for an almond property and bought a property back in 1983 in Swan Reach in the Murraylands area of South Australia, so a couple of hours out of Adelaide. So the Strutton family then spent every weekend, year after year, going to the farm, and every school holidays and so on, going to the farm and planting new trees and expanding the orchard from the original 17 acres that were there that were planted back in the 60s. So those trees were already getting pretty long in the tooth. So I was still in Adelaide school and then on to uni. And then there was sort of this natural progression where I ended up at the farm. And so that was back in around 95, that would have been. And spent the next 12 years there. And we not only expanded the almond growing operation, but then introduced yabby farming as well in plastic lined dams. And then from that, a tourism venture blossomed. And so we started having busloads of visitors, whether that was senior cits on a day out from Adelaide or on the Proud Mary riverboat coming up and down the river each week, or even school kids up on camps. So that ended up being sort of a fair bit of my focus in between the almond growing side of things, which was still our main business, and we couldn't lose sight of that. So that was right through the 90s and into the 2000s.
And then you ended up in a franchise system
Yeah, so my wife and I, we both grew up in Adelaide, and we wanted to sort of move back to Adelaide and give the kids the opportunities that we had when we were growing up. And you can't do that when you're in a small country town of just a few hundred people. So we decided that we would like to get back there while the kids, we only had one child at that time. And when we moved, she was actually pregnant with the second. And we headed back, we started looking around, I suppose, before we headed back to Adelaide, started looking around, what are we going to do? And I don't think I'm overly employable, to be honest. I've always worked for myself. And so we decided that we'd look for a business and searched around, and it came across an ad for Howard Storage World, looking for a franchisee in Adelaide at a major homemaker centre that was under the third stage of construction. So we looked into that a bit further, and we liked the product range and the philosophy behind Howard's, which was all about customer service and quality and so on. And so we looked into that and signed on the dotted line. So we then moved to Adelaide in 2007 and opened Howard Storage World at Mile End at the Homemaker Centre there in June 2007.
It's an interesting transition from agriculture to retail, but it sounds like you had quite a bit of flair in the agricultural business. It went from just growing almonds to something more, and was that an expression of your own desire to build a bigger, better, different, more resilient business? I'm interested.
I think so. The being an almond grower can be a fairly solitary sort of existence at times, sitting out there on the tractor, thinking strange thoughts. Who knows? But we had 130 acres of orchard and only required 3 people to run that, and it was the tourism, I think, that really sort of got me going. That interaction with the public that you didn't get when sitting out there on the tractor in the middle of the night spraying the trees. So I think that customer interaction or public interaction is what drew me to retail. And we have a very busy, thriving business with around 1,000 transactions every week. Many people coming through the door, and I still get a kick out of interacting with those people on the shop floor, and and solving their storage and organisational dilemmas, which is what we're all about.
Yeah, Dave, did you find there's sort of an interesting transition for you from coming from sort of the outdoors environment to going really much locked inside one of what is commonly termed a big box retailer?
A lot of people ask me, do I miss the almond growing? And there's certain aspects of it that I do. When we moved back to Adelaide, for example, I couldn't move to suburbia, having lived out in the country with no neighbours nearby. So we looked around and we ended up settling in the Adelaide Hills, and so we've sort of got a good compromise there, where we're living on an acre overlooking a lake, and the neighbours aren't too close, but I'm literally only 20 minutes from work, so it was a good spot for us to settle. And Adelaide being what it is, you can get around relatively easily, and I can jump in the car and be at work in 20 minutes from now. So we really enjoy that Adelaide Hills lifestyle, which allows me to sort of, hark back to the farming days somewhat, but I certainly don't miss the issues that you could potentially have with whether it's frosts or water supply issues or the baking sun in the middle of summer. I remember starting almond harvest one year. We always harvested from late February, March onwards. And, it was 44 degrees on that day, and sitting out there on the almond sweeper, covered from head to toe in dust. I certainly don't miss that.
No, I can imagine air conditioning would seem very good on a day like that.
Too right.
Yeah, there's a lot you don't control. On this program, Small Business Banter, we really do champion the idea of small business and controlling your destiny. Really interested to. You've transitioned from one industry to another. Can you just was there a little bit of trepidation in doing that? How did you approach taking on a whole new industry in a different kind of business model? Can you just talk a little bit about that, please, Dave?
Certainly. Look, there are some similarities. A lot of businesses have you're controlling revenues and expenses and so on. But as I mentioned before, we only had 3 people on the farm, 2 employees and myself, and 1 extra during harvest time. I've gone from that to now employing 16 people and dealing with 1,000 transactions a week. So there are quite a few differences there. And when we when we started, I was really swamped with stock and doing ordering and making sure that the shop was looking good and merchandised well, and they were all things that were new that I had to deal with. And I can tell you, I was working many hours, very long hours. My wife had a lonely existence at home because I'd be arriving back home in the early hours of the morning, having worked right through the night just to try and keep on top of things. And it was a good situation, obviously, to be in some respects, because the business was thriving immediately. We were part of stage 3 of the Homemaker Centre build, and so there was already an existing client base coming into the centre. And so as soon as we opened, plus a few other retailers as part of that third stage, we had an existing customer base there immediately. So we were really fortunate that things took off exceptionally well. But
you worked very hard. You worked very hard to make it happen.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I think that probably I could draw on the experiences that I had as a farmer. You've got to work those long hours at certain times of the year to get the job done, and it's absolutely crucial that you get the job done, whether that's harvest or spraying at certain times, or making sure the irrigation's on, or if it's frosty that night, I'd get up in the middle of the night and go and put the irrigation on to try and keep the trees from being affected in those low valleys and so on. So, I'm prepared to do that, and that I can guarantee you that I've seen others within our industry and even within our franchise that clearly aren't prepared to do that, and their results speak for themselves, I think.
Do you think, Dave, that that is a characteristic that is actually required for people who want to be successful, that they've got to be willing to do those things? And as you said before, there's a lot of people who just don't seem to want to do that. I know when I'm doing workshops, I often talk about there's two types of people. There's the sort of the people with a retirement mentality, and that they can be 18 or 80. It doesn't matter. It's not an age barrier thing. It's just that work ethic. How important do you think that is as a solopreneur and as a businessman like yourself?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's imperative. I don't think I'd ever retire, to be honest, and I'd always want to keep my fingers in some pies somewhere and keep myself active. Certainly not working the hours that I currently do or have done, and I want to continue to grow our business, but extract myself more and more from the business so that I'm not there as a crucial person within that. But to do that requires a hell of a lot of hard work and planning and preparation. And I think that to be successful in business, you've got to be determined and be prepared to put in those hours and to take some risks and so on that we have done over the years. And our results show.
Do you have any? Sorry, Michael.
There you go, Anthony. Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, do you have any tips for a lot of other business owners in relation to that? Because I would imagine there is many of the listeners are going to be there sort of working hard on their own and feeling the pressures that you've felt in your career. And I know, Michael and I have as well. It's just some tips there about how to transition from that sort of one-man band into a business, which is a business with an I rather a busyness with a Y.
Yeah. Well, I think if you are growing your business, obviously you need to start putting on additional staff as that takes place, and at the appropriate time. And you do have to sort of take that extra leap every now and again to say, okay, well, I think we're almost at that point, and then that staff member perhaps then grows into that. I've had a few opportunities along the way where potential staff members have approached me and have come from a similar industry or have some great experience that we want to draw on, and I'm often prepared to just make a position for them and keep them on board, because I know that who knows in a week or a month or in 6 months another staff member will leave, and that does happen relatively frequently in retail. But I'm not going to lose the opportunity to put someone on who has the perfect experience that we could draw on. So we will pop them on onto the payroll. Perhaps they weren't required in a full-time capacity at the time, but we will take that leap and pop them on. I think that you do need to back yourself and back your product or service that you're providing, and know it inside out, and have faith that if you market yourself correctly and have the right proposition to the public, that your business will be a success.
By the way, on Small Business Banter today, we are talking with Dave Strutton, who's an award-winning franchisee at Howard Storage World at Mile End in South Australia. Dave, you talked then about the way you're approaching the business. Australia is a very heavily franchised small business economy. Did the structure provided in the franchise give you some confidence about going into a new business, new industry? And secondly, I know you've been visible in social media, so it looks like you've sort of also undertaken some, personal brand building, as part of your overall business marketing. So firstly on the franchise, and secondly on the marketing, social media stuff.
Sure. So with the franchise, yes. When we joined, I did like the idea of franchise. It takes out some of the unknowns and some of the variables that if you're starting from scratch. So that really did attract me. I wasn't interested in a food business. I love the fact that we're in the product range that we're in, which is storage and organisational products for the home. There's no use-by date on them. If we don't sell it today, we can sell it tomorrow or next week or next month or even next year. But clearly we want to move the stock on before then. But we don't have all of that wastage. I see some of these food retailers, the amount of stuff that gets thrown out at the end of the day, or the potentially lost sales when you have a bit of a busy day that you weren't expecting. So that's why we went into the non-perishable items. The franchise, was attractive. I think the franchises sort of certainly gone through probably on the nose a little, and they've gone through a period of change, and they're perhaps not as in favour as what they were. The right franchise will succeed. Interestingly, Howard's themselves, the franchisor, actually went into administration a few years ago, and the first thing the administrator did was cull some of quite a few of the dud stores that were around the country, and that's what brought the franchisor down. So we've been out of that administration period now for over 3 years, and the business is thriving, certainly during these difficult times. We happen to be in the right product range, and people are spending more time at home and keeping themselves organised. And that's actually what led us to then expand on the social media side of things. Now, personally, I'm not actually on social media. I don't need Facebook. I don't need Instagram. I can just see myself wasting way, way too much time on those sort of things. So I've chosen not to participate in them, but I fully understand that our customer is, and majority of people are. And so that was a good way to start connecting with them on a local level. Whilst Howard's do national marketing for us, and actually that includes a lot of social media, we need to connect with our local customer and show the personality and the people behind the store, and show that it is a family-run operation. There's friendly staff there that you'll see on the camera, but you'll then see in store when you come in. And we like to joke around a little bit as well, make it lighthearted. I don't mind making a fool of myself in front of the camera, and it does.
Well, you got some notoriety, didn't you? You got it went on the ABC.
Well, it did actually. Yes, it's nice to have commercial advertising.
Don't be too modest, Dave.
So we did. We sort of. It was in. Would have been late April, early May. The ABC contacted us. And used us for one of their stories, which is sort of a good news coronavirus stories, businesses that are actually doing okay during this period. And they did really focus on our social media, because what we did, we sort of switched things around. I used to do a lot of the videos and so on for the products or the tips that we were giving. I used to do a lot of those in store. But then, obviously, because we were sort of all spending a lot more time at home, and while South Australia itself wasn't in a severe lockdown, we were all spending more time at home. And so we changed focus, and we now do a lot of the videos in our own home, showing our product and our advice being put to practice in our own home. And I don't for 1 minute pretend it's the front cover of some glossy lifestyle magazine. It's a practical use of our product in an everyday format. And so
that's the kind of advice we need. That's the kind of advice we need, Dave.
That's right. So social media has been great, and we have been doing regular videos on there and other posts. So we do 5 posts a week on both Facebook and Instagram, and we switch it around, a mixture of videos, product demos, advice, and just some lighthearted bits and pieces in there as well. And it's got quite a following and growing all the time.
Dave, what would you say to a lot of the small business owners out there who feel that their expertise is their strength, and they're very fearful about sharing their expertise in a public environment like social media? What would you say to them in terms of the benefits of actually doing that versus what they perceive as the downside?
Look, I think you've just got to connect with your customer whichever way you can. In fact, quite frankly, social media is the way of the future. It's been that way for quite some time as well. But it's just another medium to be able to connect with your customer and show that you are the expert in your field, and be confident that you are the expert, and don't be ashamed of that. And portray that to the customer or potential customer that you have a service or a product that is just right for them, and make sure you do target your customer base correctly. Don't try and be all things to all people and put it out there in the mass market. Do be more specific in the way that you target them, and from that, the business will continue to grow, often through word of mouth. Once you've managed to attract a good pool of customers, the word of mouth then accentuates that growth.
Dave, I'll put you on the spot here. You've had the benefit of being in 2 different businesses, and so if we're to say you're going to go back to almond farming, what would you do differently, having had the experience you've had through the franchise system? And this really goes to, the sort of, I guess it's going to be the close of our interview, unfortunately, but the sort of the points or the tips you'd give to owners about, battling away in their current business without the benefit of ever having worked in another business. You've worked in 2. So, would you approach it completely differently this time, going back into almond farming?
Oh, a good one. That has put me on the spot. What I think I can see, look, obviously with almond growing, when we were doing that, we were part of a private cooperative. So I didn't have to market the business. I didn't have to attract customers. What I had to focus on was growing as many almonds as possible, and maintaining the expenses at a reasonable level. So there was some profit at the end of the day. I can see the benefit, and I've seen how the almond industry has grown exponentially over the years, and whilst I would have perhaps liked to have been part of that, we went through a growth phase when we were there, but it's then continued to grow, and almond prices have gone up and down and whatever along the way. Water issues have become a real problem. I would just say, don't ever lose sight or focus of what you're doing, what you're about, and always look for ways to improve, whether that's through study or field trips or whatever. When I was back there doing almond growing, we went to the US a couple of times, and the US at that time produced around 85% of the world's almonds, probably still sitting at that level, around about there. And so they were the leader in certain aspects, but I know that Australia was certainly the leader when it came to efficient irrigation and so on. But when it came to mechanical harvesting equipment and the like, that would all come from the US. And so we took the effort to go over and find out more and investigate and invest a few dollars in that. But the benefit of that, played out in our success there.
So you needed to look outside. That would be one of your key messages. If you're buried away in your business, and it, particularly at the moment, it can be just completely overwhelming. Anthony's had an awful lot of experience dealing with owners, and they're at the end of their tether. So a little bit of hope from this idea of reaching out, talking to people, looking at the way other people run their businesses.
Yeah, no, too right. And it is. You can be a very solitary life sitting out there on the tractor in the orchard, and so you do need to interact with others in your regional community or others in your field of expertise. Compare notes, and I've seen that even within the franchise. We share data all the time, and we share our success stories all the time. And there's no reason why that couldn't be done in other businesses, whether that's regional or in the big cities.
That's great, Dave. Look, unfortunately, we've just got a short amount of time. I did want to say a very big thank you for coming on to Small Business Banter, the radio show, smallbusinessbanter.com, the website. We might post some of your social media. I think that'd be, I had a quick look last week, and it was authentic and natural, as I say. But really appreciate you taking the time, Dave Strutton, and we wish you well in your venture. And take care until next time.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Anthony.
You're welcome. Good to meet you.
So that's all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. Anthony and I continue to be inspired by bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. For any of the links, resources or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact Anthony or myself, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on both Facebook and Instagram. Anthony and I would love you to tune in at the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.